welcome to the Pitcast, ladies and gentlemen, for the Pit Crew Online. From the fans, for the fans. On today's edition, we have a very special guest with us today. He became Daniel Ricciardo's personal trainer at the start of 2018. And he joined the Pit Crew Online for an interview at the end of that year. A year and a half later, he's here again. It is Michael Italiano. Michael, welcome to the Pitcast. Thank you.
Hey, Rob. Good to be a part of it. How you doing?
Yeah, very good, mate. So, first of all, you grew up in Perth, the same as Daniel Ricciardo. What's it like there compared to other busier parts of Australia, like Melbourne or Canberra, for example?
Yeah, it's a lot different. We don't have such a dense population in Perth. I definitely think we have probably the best weather. It's always sunny. It's always sunny in Perth. Can get quite windy,
right?
But we have great beaches, great coastline, and it's a lot more quieter than Sydney and Melbourne as such. So I like it that way.
Yeah.
I like being able to go home and not have such a hectic, I guess, lifestyle, and heap of traffic on the road. I like going home and just being able to unwind. It's I don't know. For me, it's a bit of a hidden gem. I really enjoy Perth, and I think it should. It definitely warrants being talked up.
Good stuff. Do you live there now, or have you moved since? Or
since I started with Daniel, I had to relocate to Europe,
okay.
Which is probably obvious because 70% of the races are on European, so it only made sense for me to move to Europe. So I moved to London. So now I'm based in London.
Good stuff. Do you enjoy compared to Perth, or do you kind of prefer your home comforts?
Yeah, it's a big change from Perth. As I said, Perth's quite chill. London's quite crazy. We lived quite central in the first couple of years. Now we've just moved a little bit further out. So it's a bit better now, but I guess I'm just trying to get used to the weather here because it's just so cold all the time. I think summer you only get like maybe 1 or 2 good months, where Perth you probably get 6 months of heat. So no, I think I enjoy both. To answer your question, if I could do 6 months in London and 6 months in Perth, I'd have a happy life.
Yeah, it's a bit different, I suppose, in like the big cities. So obviously you've been working with Daniel for a couple of years now, with Daniel Ricciardo. When did that friendship kind of reach the point where you decided, or maybe he decided to kind of work with you as his personal trainer?
Yeah, good question. It kind of came out of the blue, to be honest, Rob. We were friends. I think we met when we were about 11 years old through mutual friends, and we were hanging out quite casually. Not too often. Daniel was, I think, living away by the age of 14, 15 in Italy, trying, aspiring for Formula One. So he'd only come home, once a year. So, I'd probably only see him once a year, maybe in December when he'd come back for Christmas. Yeah. But we stayed in touch, obviously through SMS and whatnot. But I went and I followed a couple of his races. I watched him when he was racing in the World Renault, so that was quite cool. And then I watched him, I think, in 2013 in Austin, which was good fun. We just stayed friends, but never really dabbled with working professionally together. So. It only came at the end of 2017 where he actually offered me the job, and it was unexpected, and it did kind of come out of nowhere. So I guess to answer that question, only Daniel really knows that answer, I think.
Was personal training something you wanted to go into growing up, or did you kind of have other interests of what you wanted to do with your career?
Yeah, oddly enough, growing up, I was always heavily into sports. So I was heavily into Australian rules football, so Aussie rules. So I was playing that quite seriously, and I was actually always wanted to become an architect, believe it or not. And I ended up going a little bit off centre with that, and I started studying civil and structural engineering. So I ended up becoming a civil designer in the civil engineering industry for 7 years, actually. So I had an office job.
Oh, wow.
And I was always into fitness and health and fitness, and it was always a huge passion of mine. And honestly, it took me one book. I read this one book that kind of just talked about fear and taking the big leap in life, and it kind of motivated me to do that. So I started studying in health and fitness. I think probably 2013, 14 from memory. And before you know it, I left the engineering scene, the 9-to-5 office job, and started working in a gym, training athletes, training corporates, training quite a lot of people, and became a strength and conditioning coach. And that's kind of when I think me and Daniel's personal relationship kind of blossomed a bit, because when he'd come home, he had someone to train with, someone that he could talk to about training, and I'm also competitive, so we did quite a lot together, and I think maybe that's how it kind of stemmed, how the opportunity stemmed.
Mm-hmm. So it's all kind of happened in a very short space of time, hasn't it? In the space of about 6 or 7 years, all of a sudden, your career has exploded into life, really, hasn't it? It's pretty. It's happened very quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah, it did, and you've nailed it on the head. 2018, I think, we came to an agreement late December, and he's like, mate, I need you in London in January. So I had about 20 days to pack my life up in Perth and head over and find an apartment, and it was mayhem. And when I landed there, because I was so busy in Perth, I didn't actually have a chance to actually sit back and just kind of absorb it in and realize, wow, okay, this is happening fast. And pinched myself a couple of times in February 2018, that's for sure. It's it's been fun.
That's incredible. So obviously you work with Daniel on a professional level, but you've been friends for a very long time. So kind of to what extent does your relationship with him and your work with him extend to being his mentor as well as just his personal trainer?
Yeah, so this is one of the questions I actually had for him when he first offered me the job. And this is a really good question, because part of my thinking was, I'd love to come on board and become your trainer, but we are friends, and if this is to work on a business level, you have to respect me as a coach. I know you respect me as a friend, and I know when I offer you advice, it's coming from the heart of a friend. But there's going to be times where I'm going to ask you to do things on a professional level and as a coach, and unless you respect me as a coach, this is probably not going to work, because it may be a bit of a detriment to our friendship. So that was actually one of the first questions I asked him, and he respected that, and he openly said, no, I 100% respect your work as a coach, and that's why I'm asking you. I'm not just asking you to come on as a friend. I'm asking you to obviously help me win a world title. So it's extremely important. It was something that I 100% flagged, Rob, when I first wanted to start out. It's an answer I kind of wanted before I committed to. So, and so far 3 years in, it's been exactly that. As a friend, we talk, and we give each other friendship advice, but also when we're at the paddock and when we're on an F1 circuit, Coach Mike comes out and does become a mentor and does help him from a professional level.
Can it be difficult then sometimes to differentiate between being his friend and being the professional coach, or is that kind of an easy distinction to make?
Yeah, I think the first year was difficult. Sometimes I probably admit I was probably too serious sometimes on race weekends, because You're trying to put that professional hat on. You're trying to, be the figure you think that he kind of wants. But yes, that is quite difficult at times. I guess the more time you spend with someone, the more you can kind of gauge, okay, this is the time where he needs to hear it straight. Or this is the time where, I think he needs a friend here, and he needs a bit of a pat in the back as such. So, it's a hard one to gauge, but I think as long as you have a close relationship with your driver, whether you're friends or not, I think you understand that.
Hmm. Now, obviously, it's impossible for anyone not to have noticed that we've been in a global pandemic since March. The season in Formula One hasn't been able to get underway. Basically, no sport or very little sport has been able to happen, which has meant that there's been an extremely extended off season as well for Daniel Ricciardo. He described it as the perfect training camp, being in lockdown. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your work with Daniel, and how different is it, if at all, to Daniel's usual off-season preparation?
Yeah, it was a bit of a silver lining to the whole COVID scenario. One, because we got to be in a place for 3 months, which, that's quite rare for us. I think Daniel told me he hasn't been in one place for 3 months in, I think, 13 years.
That's incredible.
He's always flying, So one, it's probably good to get, one, we were stuck at home in Perth, which was, again, I think a blessing because he got to see friends and family for an extended period of time. And March through to June in Perth is amazing. It's like 30 degrees sun. And he's fortunate enough, he's got a farm out in the outskirts of Perth that we could, that we secluded ourselves in. And we just had peace and quiet. We had serenity, and we just had a really cool place to train. So I think, being in the F1 realm, people don't really understand it. Maybe I'll explain it. It's a hectic life. You're living out of a suitcase. You're traveling every 7 days, and where you are traveling, there's people everywhere. There's people in your hotels. There's people at the track, and you're always on. It is quite full on mentally. So being able to seclude himself in, at his farm, I think it was a bit of a refresher for him. And not only that, usually I only get a month with him to prepare, probably, maybe a month and a half to prepare for the season,
Oh, wow.
the season opener. So to have 3 months just all to myself and train him, it was, for a coach, it's a blessing in disguise. I can periodize training quite accurately and perfectly. And yeah, everything went to plan. And it was great. And he was super fit. He hit a lot of PBs. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited to see how he goes.
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of fit drivers on the grid, won't we, as a result of all this in Austria.
Most definitely.
I wanted to talk as well about diet, because I know Daniel's a bit of a fan of pizza, for example. Now, obviously, a lot of it's a job in which you and Daniel are always in peak physical condition. So obviously a lot of that is down to the physical work that you do with him, and obviously for yourself as well, because you've got to stay fit to train him. How much of that is down to the diet, and just how strict is the diet for both of you?
Yeah, I think come race weekends, the diet definitely strickens up, and we start to really tighten on what we put in Daniel's body, because he has such strict weight restrictions within the car, and come qualifying he has to be super light, and then come race, he can afford to put a little bit on. So we are very, very wary heading into races. With the 3 months that we had, we weren't too strict. We were obviously mindful of eating healthy foods, and when we were going to go on maybe a heavy carb meal and cook a pesto pasta or something, I'd make sure that he'd earn the carbs. So, make sure that we've had a big session that day, or so stuff like that. I think when it was COVID, we had a balanced diet, and then like we said, when we wanted to splurge or have a cheat meal as such, we made sure we earned it. But come into the season, it's a lot more strict with our diet and supplementation protocol for sure.
Mm-hmm. And with that as well, obviously, with people staying at home, there's the gyms have been closed, for example. It's been tough for people to kind of stay fit as they normally would. On your website and on your Instagram, for example, you've been putting a lot of kind of home training and home exercises on there. So what would you say would be some really good tips for people wanting to train but aren't really able to leave their homes?
My first tip would be train in the morning, and I say that because I've now come back to London for a month, and it's obviously I had to self quarantine myself, and I realised you can really get into a bit of a slack mentality when you're just at home all day, every day, and the day can kind of catch up to you. So I feel like if you set yourself a good morning routine, you kind of have no excuses. Get up and do a workout. And like you said, I posted a lot of home body workouts just to kind of show people the extent of how many things you actually can do with minimal equipment. So my next tip would be source out. So, the internet's a big thing. YouTube is a big thing. There's a ton of content now. There's a lot of trainers posting a lot of content on how to train at home and at home efficiently. So yeah, my second tip would be definitely source out, and three would be get creative. I left my sliders. So I say sliders, they're a piece of equipment. They're like a disc. They're like slider discs, and they slide along the floor. I left them in London and realized, what, socks just do the trick on some floorboards, So you can get creative with your socks. You can get creative with your towels, your tea towels and whatnot. So that'd be my three tips.
And you mentioned, obviously, in 2018, your first year working with Daniel, you were quite serious, almost, I suppose, maybe uptight would be a word. How do you personally deal with the stresses of a Formula One paddock, especially with, obviously, the inclusion of Netflix as well in the last 2 years?
Yeah, first year was hard because, you're always going to have those natural doubts, like, oh, do I belong here in this big F1 realm? Am I good enough as a coach to help Daniel? Because, Daniel he still is in the peak of his career. So, there's a lot of pressure early on, but I guess, you got to stay positive. You got to have a, positive affirmation, knowing that, just trust the process and what you're doing and stick to it. I don't think there is one special particular way how to train an F1 driver as such. I think you just have to know the individual in and out and understand what works for them and what doesn't. I also think to handle such a high pressure job, I think it's good to have hobbies and good to have activities you enjoy to take your mind off the pressures of F1. And, a lot of things, one thing that me and Daniel do love, we both love nature. So, hiking, for instance, great way to exercise, but also get out and get some nature and just block out the whole F1 internal pressures as such. Fitness and exercising for me is a great placebo booster for me. When I train, I feel good, and that's the same as Daniel. So I'd say find your hobbies that you enjoy that's outside the circuit, and stick to them. And it's something it's very refreshing and revitalizing.
Good stuff. Well, that's been it for the Pitcast today, Michael. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been really good to talk to you and get some insight into the life of an F1 personal trainer. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Rob. No worries.
Cheers, mate.